1979, Rainbow, Down to Earth. This is an interesting album because fans of Rainbow will all know that you'd had the Ronnie James Dio years, all the sword and sorcery and all that sort of stuff and whatever. And then Ritchie Blackmore sort of decided, I want to move away from that now. Late 1978, Dio's out the door. Ritchie Blackmore wants a more mainstream sound. He wants to be a star in America again. He wants a big hit in America, and he doesn't think he's going to get that with the Ronnie James Dio on it, which is strange when you think about it. That Ronnie James Dio was American. Dio probably could have done that if he wanted to. Maybe there were one or two other things going on as well. There was a lot of angst going on between certain members of the band as well. I don't think Ritchie was too happy about the influence that Ronnie James Dio's wife had over things and all that. The fact there's a story that suggests that after Ronnie James Dio had left Rainbow, and he says he left, Ritchie says he sacked him, there was a time then when they were looking at who they were going to get. And the first person he got in, incidentally, which is quite bizarre if you think about it, well, obviously was Roger Glover. Now, why is that bizarre? Well, for those that don't know, which I'm guessing for the people that watch this channel, it's probably a very small amount of people. Back in 1973, when the second lineup of Deep Purple was about to come to an end, Ritchie Blackmore had said, well, if you get rid of Roger Glover, I'll stay. Just 5 years later, he wants to resurrect his band. He wants to turn his band into something else. Who does he turn to? Roger Glover. But he initially turned to Roger Glover to be the producer of the album, not the bass player. Now, I think the initial idea was for Roger Glover to come in and help write the songs and do the producing, and that was it. Obviously that changed as time went on. What he's going to do next is going to find a singer. Now, there are suggestions that Ian Gillan was approached. That may or may not be true, I don't know. Probably is. David Coverdale, was he approached? Why would either of them jump ship from their bands that were just starting to make a bit of a splash to go back into a band with Ritchie Blackmore when they know what sort of control Ritchie Blackmore likes to have over stuff, and that they've been on the wrong side of that before? I don't believe, and I don't know, but I don't believe that either of those, Ian Gillan or David Coverdale, seriously ever contemplated joining Rainbow. Pete Golby was another person who was asked, and apparently got as far as going down for a bit of a blow with them. How long that lasted, I don't know. Pete Golby, for those that don't know, at that point was in Trapeze. There's all this incestuous Deep Purple stuff, isn't it? He'd been in Trapeze, which was obviously the band that Glenn Hughes was in before he joined Deep Purple. Mel Galley was going to go into Whitesnake a few years later. Whether Pete Golby went down and had a go again, I think he probably did. I think him and Ritchie probably didn't get on, it didn't work. I don't know. Now, there's this story that Ritchie Blackmore remembered a band with the Marbles and a singer called Graham Bonnet. Now, he probably did, but all this romantic stuff isn't 100% right at all, because Graham Bonnet hadn't disappeared at all. He was around. He'd made a solo album just a year or so before with a lot of people who were involved in the same sort of music scene. Mickey Moody had played guitar on it for a start off. And he recorded it in London, so he wasn't a lost person who had to be tracked down. And I'm fairly certain as well that it was Roger Glover that found him, not Ritchie Blackmore. They invited him down for a bit of a go to see if it worked, and Ritchie Blackmore decided, yeah, he did, he was okay. But he wasn't overly keen about the way the bloke looked, because he looked like James Dean. He didn't look like a rock star. I don't think it mattered that much in the end, because at the time, in fact, he may have done them some good thinking about it logically, because you've got all this sort of new wavy stuff coming in and all this whatever, and the fact that Rainbow had got a singer in a shirt and a waistcoat with a short haircut maybe made other people listen to it with a more open mind than they would have done if he had been a bloke with long curly hair. And I don't know. The first single that came out was Since You've Been Gone, a Russ Ballard track, which again had been recorded by one or two other bands in the years before. It instantly became it. Ritchie Blackmore got what he wanted. He was suddenly in the charts again. He was relevant to all that type of stuff. The second single, of course, which was All Night Long, was far more down a sort of rock route, especially sort of lyrically. Where does that actually put this album in whole scheme of Ritchie Blackmore's career. I don't think a lot of people realise that this one and the one that came after it, which obviously had a different singer on it, Geraldine Turner. But what about the rest of it? The rest of it is what you would expect if you were a Rainbow fan to come from a Rainbow album. It's not all Since You've Been Gone. And there's some serious tracks going on here with some great guitar in Lost in Hollywood. It's the opening track, well, not the opening track, Eyes of the World is the track that used to open the live shows. Should have opened the album, really. I'm sure if they were given a chance to redo it, it would make Eyes of the World the opening track, but maybe the beginning of that was a little bit too much like Tarot Woman from Rainbow Rising. There's probably a ton of people who bought this album on the basis of those two singles, who shoved it in a cupboard and never played it ever again because the rest of the album didn't sound like the two singles. So it's a funny old album, that, and sometimes if you're a Rainbow fan, if you're a Ritchie Blackmore fan, this is an album that you can overlook because you can think, oh, not long since you've been gone. But I always sort of come back to it when I listen to the live stuff. I've got a live box set, Rainbow Down to Earth Tour. Now this is a CD box set, CD because it's smaller. Open little box up, velvet inside to the box, lovely thing this. And then what have you got? Well, we got a gig from Chicago 1979. We've got a gig from Denver 1979. And we've got a gig from Long Island 1979. And it's listening to these that actually make you realise just how good the tracks that were on that Down to Earth album were, because on it you've got Eyes of the World opens the thing up, then you've got Love's No Friend, then you've got Since You've Been Gone, then you've got All Night Long, then you've got Lost in Hollywood, and you've only got Man on the Silver Mountain and Long Live Rock and Roll. Later on, these are from gigs in America where they weren't the headline actor, they were only doing an hour or so, but they were concentrating on the Down to Earth album, and that's when you realise just how good the songs they are. And some great stuff on there. We've also got another thing of the Monsters of Rock set, because obviously Rainbow headline, this is how big Rainbow were at the time. They were chosen to headline the very first Monsters of Rock, which was obviously in 1980. This album came out in 1979. That ended up being, of course, the last album that Graham Bonnet did with Rainbow, but on there's one or two more of the older tracks, and also there's a cover version of Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, which is again interesting because Graham Bonnet had released that, or he recorded that on his solo album a couple of years before he joined Rainbow, so he wasn't that lost, was he? He was easily accessible to everybody, really. And stories abound, or whatever, that Rainbow recorded that and that was going to be released as a single at some point. I don't know how true that is. I don't quite know why you would release a single that long after your current album had been out. Maybe it was going to be on the next album, which obviously turned out to be difficult to cure, and it would have been on that because there were one or two covers on that album. Obviously, Since You've Been Gone was a cover as well. So this is very much it's a sort of morphing album, if you like. It morphs between the Dio stuff and the stuff that went later on. For some people, the Geraldine Turner years went just a little bit too American, a little bit too radio friendly. This one is a perfect stepping stone between the two, because you've got those radio friendly Since You've Been Gone and All Night Long. But even saying that, All Night Long is pretty heavy, and lyrically it's probably not all that radio friendly if you think about it. The rest of the tracks I think, with the possible exception of Time to Lose It, Ritchie Blackmore said was like that of all rubbish. I don't mind it, I think it's alright. This is an album that is worth listening to in its own right, but you think about it as a stepping stone from the Dio to the Geraldine Turner, it sort of makes more sense if you think of it that way. There are some really good songs on here, and that if the band had stayed in the lineup that it was in, and they would have become live staples for years to come. This album came out as a limited edition. I think it was a limited edition, I don't know. On clear vinyl as well as black vinyl. But my copy, bizarrely, here's the cover. There's the inner cover. And there's the black vinyl. I've got just a plain white cover here. I've got a clear vinyl version in there as well. With the special sort of rainbow label in there, so I don't know how scarce the clear vinyl is. I don't think it's all that difficult to pick up. When people say clear vinyl doesn't sound all that good, I've played the black vinyl and the clear vinyl and they both sound fine to me. So there you go. Rainbow, Down to Earth. It's not just Since You've Been Gone and All Night Long, although they are a very special part of the Rainbow story. Tracks like Eyes of the World, Lost No Friend, Lost in Hollywood, great tracks. And this is the last album, of course, to feature Cozy Powell, the only album to feature Graham Bonnet. So it was just Blackmore, an Airey that went on to the next lineup of the band where Joe Lynn Turner came in. So yeah, don't dismiss this album because it's not got Ronnie James Dio on it. I know Graham Bonnet is a Marmite character. Some people think he's great, some people can't stand him. I have that issue with him sometimes. I think on this album he's brilliant. On his first two solo albums he was brilliant. Some of the later stuff that he did I can't listen to it, it's just wailing to me. But on this, top notch. And also I've got just because of the way that I am, I've just got this sneaking admiration for the bloke because he wouldn't conform and he wouldn't grow his hair and he wouldn't change his style, and he went, that's me, you wanted me to come in and sing and that's what I look like, and you like it or you lump it. So maybe Graham Bonnet is one of the people who challenged Ritchie Blackmore the most, because who knows, he didn't conform, did he?